Welcome to the September Talk with the Doc session. It's nice to see everyone. I'm Casey Peluso of Parkinson Foundation, Western Pennsylvania. And as always, we are joined by Dr. Timothy Leichliter, movement disorder specialist from Allegheny Health Network. Thank you, Dr. Leichliter. Please take it away.
Thank you, Casey. Welcome back, everybody. Again, for those of you who know me, welcome back. If you've been here before, welcome back. If you haven't, if you're new, welcome. I'm Dr. Leichliter. I am a so-called movement disorder specialist here at Allegheny General Hospital. This is a good question and answer session, and so the best way to send in questions is to type them into the chat box. This got updated, so my audio wasn't working all that well, but I think it sounds like it's working now, so we're going to go with it. I got a bunch of questions in email that I'll start with, so that'll give you a chance to type in some questions, and then we'll go from there. Again, this is a good general informational session, so this is not a good place to get one-on-one care. This is what I always say. Don't say, hey, I'm on this, this, and this. What do you think I should do next? That's a great question for your doctor. The other caveat that I like to throw out or warning is that everything you're about to get is my opinion. I have a lot of opinions, but they are just my opinion. I think there is based on scientific evidence as I can, but no, there's not always evidence for this stuff. So sometimes I do have to make stuff up, in which case I'll give you the heads up on making stuff up. But if you see somebody different, or if you see another neurologist or another movement disorder specialist, they may have a different opinion. Well, such is life. You're here for me, and I'm going to give you my opinion. With that, I'm going to get started with the questions that I got in email. So you're going to see me looking over here because I got two screens and I haven't figured out how to do it correctly. So such is life. What does the gut have to do with the brain and Parkinson's disease? Well, this is a great question. And actually, first three questions are all on the gut. The second question is, why aren't we researching the gut more? And the third is actually an article about how scientists have found the answer for Parkinson's disease, and it's the gut. And so all of that together is there's a lot actually looked at in the gastrointestinal system in Parkinson's disease. And so we've known for a long time that the gut is involved in Parkinson's disease. Most people on here probably have some constipation or constant fullness or lack of appetite or decreased gastric emptying because the entire GI system slows down top to bottom. And so we've known this for a long time, and a lot of times the constipation comes before the movement part comes. So I see patients and I'm like, "Do you have constipation?" They're like, "Yes, I've had it for years." And so we know that it is directly involved in Parkinson's disease. We just haven't quite figured out exactly how. They've done studies on this. And so the question number two is, why aren't we looking at this? Is we are looking at this. We've done studies on this. We've done research papers on this. They did a study in one of the Scandinavian countries. I can't remember if it was Finland. I feel like it was Finland, but maybe it was Norway or something like that, where they did a study looking at people who would have their vagus nerve cut for whatever reason. And their chances of going on to develop Parkinson's disease goes way down in that study. And because we think it gets from the gut up to the brain via this nerve in some fashion. And so we know that there's definitely a correlation there. We also know there's a whole bunch of dopamine nerves in the GI system, in the enteric nervous system, which is the nervous system that controls the gut. And so we know this is involved. And we know that, again, coming back to the scientific discovery that suggested that they figured out what causes Parkinson's disease is we know that the gut bacteria and the microbiome in people with Parkinson's disease is different than quote unquote normal people. And so the paper that whoever it is that sent to me, which was nice, which I had already seen, suggested that they found an elevated kind of specific bacteria in people with Parkinson's disease. And so the next steps are, can we do something about that? Can we eradicate this strain of bacteria while protecting the good bacteria? Is there a way we can use this to diagnose or treat or cure Parkinson's disease? And so at the end of the day, the short answer is yes, this is being studied. Yes, this is fairly well known. And yes, we know there's a connection. We just haven't figured out how to use it to our advantage yet. There are definitely some things that predict Parkinson's disease, although not perfectly. but we just haven't figured out how to use that to our advantage. We have not necessarily figured out how to target this specific bacteria to get rid of it while not getting rid of everything, because you don't want to get rid of the good bacteria. You do need bacteria in your gut. We haven't been able to figure out how to use this as a predictive model for people with Parkinson's disease. And so there's a lot that we still don't know about the gut and the brain relationship. We definitely know there's a connection. We definitely know there's a lot of distinctions and differences in normal people and people with Parkinson's disease in terms of how their gut works and what's available there. We know through looking back that if you disconnect the gut from the brain, perhaps that does do something, but we really haven't figured out what to do with that information. We have not had great success with things like probiotics and prebiotics, which everybody asks about. And if you want to take them, you're more than welcome to, but the data is fairly limited. And so we really haven't been able to figure out how to use the gut biome to our advantage. I think it is an area of research. There's a lot of people who are still working on this. I'm sure at the meeting that I'm going to go to, there's going to be papers and posters on this stuff. And I'm always interested in reading and learning about it, but I'm still waiting for that kind of breakthrough that says, this is what it means. This is how we can use it to our advantage. And I just think we're not there yet. But so a lot of questions on the gut. There's definitely a connection there. It's definitely involved, and we're still just trying to figure out what we can do to use that to our advantage. The next question is, and it's a little bit of a story. I visited my brother a few days ago at his apartment, and he sat with his chin on his chest. What seemed to me as if he wasn't looking at me. I talked for a while, finally asked if he was feeling okay, and he picked his head up. He didn't realize how he was sitting. So there's a second part of the actual question, but I'm gonna stop there. So head drop syndrome is not an uncommon problem in Parkinson's disease. It's an extremely difficult problem to work on. It's not something that really responds to medicines all that well, but it is a well-known symptom of Parkinson's disease and some of the Parkinsonisms. And it's exactly what it sounds like, where the head is down. It's not necessarily being pulled down. Sometimes it's just down. Sometimes people don't recognize how they're sitting and they don't recognize their posture. A lot of times they don't. And it's another symptom that we do see not uncommonly. The the question goes on. And so question number one is, did he not realize how he was sitting? And the answer is probably not. It was probably either more comfortable or just natural for him to put his head down. And so he probably didn't really recognize it was abnormal. The next part I thought was interesting. I read an article about not nagging because Parkinson's disease patients don't necessarily have the mental energy or brain space to think about keeping their eyes open or sitting up while thinking about other things. Am I on the right track? Well, you're right. There is so much brain reserve that patients have. And again, patients with Parkinson's disease are constantly using up a lot of brain energy just doing day-to-day tasks, things that we'll call quote unquote normal people, things you don't have to think about, like talking in a loud voice, sitting up straight, taking big steps, swinging your arms when you walk. All of these things have to be thought about and use up brain energy when we're dealing with people with Parkinson's disease. And that is very fatiguing and tiring. And the nagging part is tough because, I see it both ways. I take care of a lot of patients who are like, oh, all they do is nag, 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 nag. And I stop listening to them. And I have caregivers who they do, we won't call it nagging, we'll just say correcting different aspects of the disease or different motor symptoms. And there's no right answer, because again, if you do bring it to their attention, he can sit up and look at you and things like that, so it does help. But at some point it does get maybe a little bit too much, and then they're not very happy with you, you're not very happy with them, and it becomes a little bit of a fight or a battle. And so the short answer to that question is it really depends on how important it is to you and how much of a battle or a conversation or a fight are you willing to have to try to get them to do whatever you're asking. Again, much like everything else in Parkinson's disease, these things can be worked on or can be corrected. He can put his head up and look at you and things like that. It just requires a lot of brain energy and activity, which in turn is very fatiguing and tiring. And so it depends on how important it really is to you that he looks at you. That's how I would answer that question. But I thought that was an interesting one. Can I please share my thoughts about the Q device? So the Q device is this vibrating device that goes on your chest that helps with freezing of gait, walking, balance, things like that. My thoughts are I haven't been able to get one. So this device has been available in Europe for a few years. I'm not even sure how long. And at one point I was on the email list from the company to say, hey, we're trying to get it through the FDA. We're trying to get it approved. And I just stopped hearing about it. And so the downside to being in this country is our FDA is very difficult and challenging to get devices pushed through, particularly without any randomized controlled trials, things of that nature. And it just takes forever. So things that are available in Europe, the Q3, some pumps, some different delivery systems, just either take forever to get here or never get here, just because our FDA is so hard to get things pushed through. The idea is that it's called Q for a reason, is it cues you. So much like in physical therapy, to work on stepping of gait, freezing of gait, getting unstuck, trying to work on mobility, walking, and balance, they use a lot of cueing. So a lot of counting, a lot of left, right, a metronome, music. There's infinity ways you can cue somebody to get them unstuck or have them take better walking and steps. This was another device that would do it, which was a wearable device. Again, the downside is I've yet to actually get my hands on one. I have not seen anybody have one. And so even though it's kind of advertised towards people with Parkinson's disease, until I can get one or until I can see it in live action, I don't really have a lot of thoughts on it. And so more to come if and when I ever get one here. The next question, I'm not entirely sure because I feel like I'm missing part of the question. It said, tried everything, including Botox without success, recommendations at this time, but it doesn't give me more information than that. Now, I can extrapolate the things in Parkinson's disease that I use Botox for are usually drooling. And if that's the case, then there are some medicines we use, including glycopyrrolate or atropine drops or a scopolamine patch, but they all come with a price. Maybe we could switch from Botox to Xeomin or Xeomin to Myoblock. There are a couple different versions of botulinum toxin that I'd use for drooling. If the question is more about like dystonic spasms, which is the other thing that I Botox or use botulinum toxin for in Parkinson's disease, then you're left going back to medications or things like that. Again, I don't think I got the full question there in the email, but hopefully that answered whatever it is you were trying to ask about. We got cranberry apple tea today. It's an interesting one. Are there any current clinical trials using wasp venom? So bee venom, wasp venom, this is actually, and I do think there's actually still trials going on. I'm just not sure where they're done. I tried to look it up real quick and I couldn't find anybody who was actively doing it. But so there is some evidence to suggest that bee venom and wasp venom can actually help treat Parkinson's disease. And I feel like just within the past week, I had a patient come back, or maybe it was one of my nurse practitioners who said they had a patient who said he got stung by a bee and all of a sudden his Parkinson's symptoms were much better. And so it has sort of been looked at as an adjunctive therapy for people with Parkinson's disease. I'm not sure we quite grasp the mechanism of action or how it works or things like that, but I do feel like I read somewhere that there are trials going on or they're studying this, and so more to come. Again, I don't think anybody is really volunteering to have a bee or a wasp sting them repeatedly to see if it helps from a Parkinson's standpoint. At least I wouldn't volunteer for that. But if there's a way we could figure out what it is in the venom that actually helps and we can isolate that and use that to our advantage, I think that's what they're trying to accomplish. And so I think there is research going on in the venom world. I'm just not sure who's doing it or who's running it or how close they are to kind of giving us information, but it is interesting nonetheless. And I feel like just earlier this week, I had something similar. Can dystonia happen in the chest so that it feels like a heart attack? I don't think I've ever once run into that. So dystonia is muscle contractions. So dystonia is abnormal muscle contractions leading to twisting and fixed postures or tremoring postures. And so a lot of people will notice that their toes curl up or their foot turns in, or some people have writer's cramp, or if they write for a while, their hand claws up. Those are all focal forms of dystonia. Probably the most common adult version that I see is cervical dystonia. So coming with a turn or a tilt or a tremor, that's a dystonia. So it's a form of this abnormal muscle contracting problem. I can logically assume that it is indeed possible that you could get spasms of your chest wall muscles in a dystonic fashion that would feel like a heart attack. I've never seen it. I've never seen that. Nobody has ever come to me and said I had this squeezing chest pain and it turned out it was dystonia, at least not as far as I know. But I can make a logical extrapolation that if you can get muscle contractions in other muscles, you could probably get that spasm in your chest wall muscles, and that would indeed mimic or feel like a heart attack. Again, I'm gonna answer the question with yes, it seems plausible or possible, but I'm kind of caveat that with I've never seen that. And so again, if you have chest pain, even if you think it's dystonia, you probably still need to get that looked at and make sure you're not having a heart attack. Because I certainly don't want you to have a heart attack because we thought it was dystonia. That would be my answer. I have a sister who's been diagnosed with Parkinson's and suffers with extreme amount of anxiety constantly. I know that Parkinson's affects the autonomic system and anxiety is a symptom of Parkinson's. She's tried antidepressants and anti-anxiety medicines and nothing helps. Can I please address this? Well, yes. So it is well known that anxiety and depression are non-motor symptoms of Parkinson's disease. In fact, statistically, it's listed as 50% of people with Parkinson's disease also have an underlying mood problem. And I think that is a severe underestimate. I think it is probably closer to 80%, 90%, or probably even every single patient has some component of anxiety, depression, or some other mood disorder to go along with their Parkinson's disease. I think it's probably more likely than not that you do. Now, I would argue that most people, and I'm going to say most in quotation marks, I don't actually have a statistic for that. Most people, we can find a medicine that helps. I do use a lot of the antidepressants, the SSRIs, the SNRIs, the anxiety medicines, the benzodiazepines. I use some or all of these medicines in a large number of patients. And a lot of times they do indeed work, but we do run into people where they just don't. Now, the first thing I do is I say you need a psychiatrist. So even though primary care doctors and neurologists or people like myself, I mean, it's not like we don't come across anxiety and depression on a regular basis. And yes, I do indeed try to treat it as best I can, but psychiatrists are the best at this. This is what they do. This is what they take care of. And every time I suggest a psychiatrist, I get a bad look saying, oh, no, I don't want to go see a psychiatrist. I know. But they really are the best people, the most well-equipped people, the most well-trained people to actually do a better job of treating anxiety and depression. And so the first thing I would say is if you're not seeing a psychiatrist, you should see a psychiatrist. They are much better at mixing medicines, which sometimes you do need more than one medicine. And I would also suggest a psychologist. I feel like actually most people should have a psychologist. If you are dealing with a chronic progressive condition, you need to figure out and learn and cope with it. And that's hard to do. That is hard to do on your own. That is hard to do with your caregiver. Psychologists, therapists, these people are trained to help you deal with, cope with, learn how to live with the issues that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And so I actually am not very good at that. That doesn't come to mind quickly. So I'm not very good at referring my patients for stuff like this, but I probably should do better because I really do think the behavioral health teams can really help patients not fix it and not even say just suck it up because that's stupid, but learn how to cope with it and learn how to deal with it. Again, the medicines are helpful. And so again, I'm not sure what to tell you if you've tried literally every medicine known to man. Again, I would suggest starting with a psychiatrist and maybe a combination of things might be the best way to work. But at the end of the day, a therapist or a psychologist might also be really helpful because you do have to kind of work through it and work with it to get through your day-to-day life. And that's hard to do. And it's even harder for a caregiver to try to help you do because that just is not usually the best way it works. And so while I don't have a specific answer for you, it's back to the drawing board from a medication standpoint or a combination of medication standpoint. But if it really is that big of an issue, you really need the behavioral health people on board to help guide that. They're much better at it than I am. They're much better at it than your primary care doctor is, so on and so forth. I don't know where the advertisement for Crexont, if that's how you say it, came from, but man, everybody has heard about it. Must have been a news report or something that came out because I've answered this question a whole lot of times over the past week or so. So what can you tell us about the new drug Crexont? It's immediate and extended release levodopa, carbidopa in one pill. Is it being used here, and what do you think about it? Well, the short answer is from the same makers, I believe, as Rotari. And so we've already done this. So Rotari is immediate release and controlled release capsule, or carbidopa, levodopa in one capsule. And the ideal was that it would extend the beneficial time or the on time in people taking carbidopa, levodopa better than regular Cinemet. And I think it's the same makers that make Crexont. This is kind of their newest version, which is even longer lasting. So theoretically, you can go from 4 times a day or 5 times per day down to 3 or 4 times per day, potentially even twice a day. Again, coming up with kind of more sustained release or controlled release type of levodopa. Again, the short answer is yes, it's been approved, which is why I think everybody heard about it, because it probably made the news somewhere for its approval, but I still can't get it. I still can't get it, at least not in production, not through insurance. I have not gotten it. I talk to the reps for the drug companies all the time. They come to my office, they hunt me down. I usually make my team talk to them because I don't want to, and I can do that. But at the end of the day, I do have my team talking to all these drug company reps and learning more about when we can get things. And thus far, I have been told I cannot get it just yet. And so I have no experience with it yet, until I'm able to get it, until it's either better produced, more available, and potentially, which I know it won't be right away, covered by insurance. I have a feeling this is going to be one of those cases where it's approved and maybe we can get it, but now they're going to say you have to try this, this, and this, and this before I can actually get it approved through insurance and covered. And I'm sure, much like every other new medicine that's ever been created in known demand, it's going to cost infinity dollars, at least for the foreseeable future. And so more to come on it once I'm able to get my hands on it, once I'm able to use it, once I'm able to try it, then I will absolutely tell you what my experience with it is. For now, I'm with you guys. I'm just waiting until it's available, until I can get it, and then we'll get started with it. And then the last question that I got in email was about smart shoes designed to walk with confidence, available in the European Union and the United States. And so I don't think I had actually heard about this until I read this question. So I did look it up. And this is a company called New Shoe, or the shoe is called New Shoe. The company is called Magnus. And so I was looking a little bit at this, and so it's touted, if you go to their website, as sensor-equipped shoes that are designed to support people with walking difficulties due to Parkinson's disease and other neurological conditions. And apparently it has the approval in Europe and this country. But it seems like it's more of a, like, I don't think there's any cueing device or stimulator device in it. It looks like, oh no, it can provide vibro-tactile feedback. So maybe it does have some sort of stimulating device in it, but it seems like it's more data collecting. So it seems like it's able to analyze your walking, analyze your gait, and then give you some sort of report about where your problems are. Now that might be useful for like a physical therapist to evaluate and say, okay, this is maybe going to guide or direct how we work on your walking and balance, but I'm not sure it does much for me in terms of how I treat you. Maybe there is some sort of, it says can provide vibro-tactile feedback. So I'm assuming it buzzes or something like that. And maybe that can cue you to get unstuck. Again, coming back to the whole cueing idea. Again, the downside is, which I also looked at, was if you go and say, hey, I would like to buy this, they're about $1,300. Again, a fall costs a whole lot more than $1,300, but at the end of the day, that seems like a whole lot of money for something I don't have much experience with, or I don't have a good um, kind of understanding for. So again, take that for what you will. I did look them up. They are technically approved in this country. Theoretically, you can buy them. But it is going to cost you a bit of money. And at the end of the day, I'm not entirely sure how beneficial they are because I haven't seen them. I haven't played with them. I haven't had a chance. I think what I'll do is I'll show this to my physical therapist, get his opinion on it, see what he thinks, see if it's worth maybe meeting with the company, seeing if we can get a discount or anything that they'll let me play with. Because sometimes companies, if they really want to sell their product, will give me or him a trial. So let me talk, more to come on this. Let me talk to my physical therapist, see what he thinks about these shoes, and then maybe I can give you a better understanding. And so at the end of the day, more to come on that one. But that was the last question that I had in my email. Seems interesting. And again, if anything helps people not fall or walk a little bit better, I'm all for it. All right, now I'm going to scroll up here. So again, keep typing in your questions and I'll keep answering them. Can PD cause urinary problems, such as increased urinary frequency or sudden urge to urinate? And the short answer is yes. If you've watched enough of my presentations, you know that if you start a question with can PD ... the answer is almost always yes. Parkinson's disease can literally affect every single system that you have in your body, top to bottom, left to right. Urinary issues are very common. I hear about them a lot, but I'm also not very good at fixing them. And so this is another case where I do send people to urology or things of that nature to see what we can do. And I do hear two common things. So one is frequency and urge. Well, I take it back. One is frequency and urge and inability to know when you have to go, which leads to accidents. And two is frequency and urge that leads to you not being able to move fast enough to get to the bathroom that causes an accident. So those are probably the two things. So one is you don't really feel or you don't get a lot of warning and you just go. And another is you get a warning and you just can't move fast enough to go. And it's important because you treat those two things differently. So one is if it's just when you got to go, you got to go and you can't move fast enough, then maybe I need to try more medicine to see if I can get you move faster. I do use some medicines, however, from a urinary standpoint. Sometimes I'll order medicines like oxybutynin or Vesicare. Those are the only two I really know how to use. But realistically, a urologist is probably the best one to work on that. And it is such a bothersome problem that it's not uncommon for me to send people to urology. Short answer to your question is yes, very common in Parkinson's disease. Yes, likely caused by the Parkinson's disease. And yet I'm still probably not the best person to try to fix it and see what we can do. What is the reason for excessive sweating and why does it amplify with Parkinson's disease? Good questions. So sweating comes from a lot of different varieties. So it could be hormonal. There are other reasons that sweating can be an issue. But realistically, it's usually because it's driven by the autonomic nervous system. And so the autonomic nervous system is your automatic nervous system. It controls things that you typically do not have to think about, things like blood pressure, things like heart rate, things like going to the bathroom, things that are usually outside of your thought control are usually driven by the autonomic nervous system. And sweating is also driven by this. And so, again, because that system can be impacted in Parkinson's disease, all of the things that that system can control can also be impacted in Parkinson's disease. And so sweating, either excessive or not enough, can both happen. And again, it's another one of those things. And the common theme is things like autonomic problems or non-motor symptoms are usually the most bothersome symptoms. And they're also the ones that I'm the least good or equipped to fix. They're the ones that don't respond to medicine as well as, say, tremors do or stiffness does. And that's why people constantly ask about these things because they are really difficult problems. They're embarrassing problems, they're bothersome problems, they impact day-to-day life and quality of life, and they're the ones that they don't respond as well to the medications, which makes them even more difficult. But the short answer is again, because your autonomic nervous system is impacted in Parkinson's disease, you very well could notice some sweating problems. Do I recommend a vegetarian diet for patients with Parkinson's disease? No, I don't. In fact, I very rarely actually recommend a diet or dietary changes to people with Parkinson's disease, only because, again, the data is not great. Now, that's a hard thing to study. Diet is a really hard thing to do good trials for. And really, there's not as much written about diet as there is about things like exercise and all the other stuff that I talk about. The only things that I remember seeing written about diet and Parkinson's disease centered around the Mediterranean diet being probably the best diet. I didn't think that was going out on a limb. I think the Mediterranean diet is probably the best diet for everybody on the planet, not just people with Parkinson's disease. And so I wasn't too surprised when I read that. But it's also not exactly easy to stick to in Pittsburgh, right? We don't live near an ocean. We don't have, we're not in a tropical climate. It is hard to stick to those kind of diets when when it's not readily available. Um, I haven't necessarily, vegetarian diet is, I don't want to say usually thought to be healthier, but less inflammatory than, say, high amounts of red meat or highly processed foods, things like that. But there's definitely vegetarian things out there that aren't all that healthy too. And so usually I just recommend a healthy diet, as close to the Mediterranean diet as you can stick, but as healthy of a diet as you can. I usually harp more on exercise than I do on diet, just because I've read more about it and know more about it. But again, that's my usual stick on diet. And I do agree that hypnotherapy might be helpful for stress and anxiety. And I do tell people about yoga, not as much qigong, only just because I don't know about it very much. I talk more about yoga, tai chi. I don't necessarily delve into the meditation, although there's definitely studies that suggest meditation and mindfulness are very good for everybody, but also with people with Parkinson's disease. Um, Probably because I only have so much time to talk to people about all the different things that I want to talk about, and these aren't usually high on my list. If people ask about them, we talk about them, because I do think they're beneficial, especially for things like anxiety and stress, but also walking in balance and things of that nature. And so if somebody asks about them, we talk about them, but I don't know that I necessarily often start a conversation and say, hey, what do you think about yoga or meditation or mindfulness or these things? I don't know as much about them as I probably should to be having that conversation. And again, my time is kind of limited in terms of what I can and can't cover. What is the role of physical therapy and occupational therapy throughout the course of Parkinson's disease? And the role is huge. I send a lot of my patients to probably more physical therapy than occupational therapy, but definitely the combination of both. And I would be amiss if I didn't mention speech therapy in this too. I probably send more people to therapy than most specialists, doctors, neurologists, because it's such a useful tool, especially when I'm trying to hold off on increasing medicine or changing medicine. Physical therapy, speech therapy, these are good ways to try to work on it without having to give you more medicine if we can. And I happen to have a physical therapist and a speech therapist that's in my comprehensive clinic who sees my patients with me same day, same office appointment. And so I am probably the champion of using therapy to my advantage. And I think they're all very useful tools for trying to help control symptoms, trying to help you function better, trying to help you do better in day-to-day life, move better, feel better, so on and so forth. We know there's limitations to medications. Again, everything comes with a price. And so if I can find a way, if I can find a therapy that might help as opposed to increasing a medicine, I'm all for it. And so physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, they have huge roles throughout the course of Parkinson's disease, and not just later course Parkinson's disease. It's not uncommon for me to send earlier people who maybe aren't even doing that bad or feel like they're doing pretty well. I still might recommend therapy because there's always something you can learn. There's always something we can improve upon. And so I use a lot of therapy in my patients. Being around the patient, I don't notice progression as much, but then family members come around and seem to notice declines more. Our doctor visits really the best slash only way to get a true reading on status, bearing in mind that even that depends on whether it's a good day or bad day. The short answer is no. It's a very common thing that I hear. People, either patients themselves, don't necessarily notice as much change or decline, and caregivers or people who are with them 24/7 or all the time also don't notice subtle changes or slow decline. But if somebody who hasn't seen you in a couple of months or 6 months, or the kids come in for a holiday, they are going to be much more likely to notice changes from the last time they saw you, as opposed to you noticing changes day in and day out. And so that's a common complaint that I get, or a common story that I hear all the time. Usually they come with somebody else and they say, I hadn't seen him in months, and man, there's been such a dramatic decline. Meanwhile, the patient's sitting there telling me, I think I'm doing okay. I haven't really noticed much change. And no, doctor visits are definitely not the best way to figure out who's doing well and who isn't. Again, all of these things, patients themselves, caregivers, friends, families, neighbors, everybody gets an opinion and gets to say whether or not things are stable or not. And because you get a short time with me or your doctor, I mean, we see you for what, 20 minutes every few months? I mean, that's not, and you're right. And everybody does better when they're in my office too. That's just a fact of life. 10 times a day I hear he doesn't walk like that at home. He's so much worse at home. He's putting on a show for you. And I know that. But people do have good times when they come to my office. You know, I recognize that symptoms fluctuate throughout the day, and I get to see you for such a short window that I don't get a great view of how things are all the time. And so I do rely heavily on patients' perspective, families' perspective, anybody who's willing to give me a perspective about how things really are. And I think that's probably a better true measure than just what I think when I see you in my office on such a short time interval. But that's a pretty common story that I hear. Yeah. Do you find that as you increase the medicine burden, especially the frequency taking carbidopa, levodopa, that you have less and less on time, more dyskinesia and hypotension problems? The short answer is yes. So we do know that it's not a straight line, right? It's kind of whatever the math term for a curve is. Um, the higher and higher I push it's the law of diminishing returns. You know, you initially start carbidopa, levodopa, and a little bit helps a lot. But then as we increase it dose by dose, each dose increase helps only a little bit more, less and less more. That's just what you see with it. It is a law of diminishing returns. And then you do run into more and more side effects, the more doses, the more times you take it. Um, and so could you get away with it? And she brings up the idea in the next part of the question of divvy. Divvy is a carbidopa, levodopa that scores so you can cut it into quarters. You know, could you get away with taking a small amount more frequently throughout the day, or is it better to stick to 3 or 4 times a day? And the short answer is there's no right answer. I have patients that have it dissolved in liquid and take a drink every hour. I have patients that take a pill every hour and a half or 2 hours. And then I have patients that'll take 3 or 4 pills 4 times a day. Um, and neither is right. There is no right answer. Everything that I do for you or with you or to you in the office is aimed at quality of life. Carbidopa, levodopa, I don't have a medicine that's fixing the problem, curing the problem, slowing the problem down. I am not aimed at trying to fix you. I'm aimed at trying to get you back and as able as possible to doing the things you like to do, want to do, need to do as well as possible. Everything that I'm doing from a medication standpoint is aimed at trying to improve your quality of life. End of story. And so if taking a whole bunch of pills a few times a day is what helps your quality of life the best, great, let's do it. If taking a small amount very frequently throughout the day is the best way to get you feeling the best and giving you the best ability to do the things you want to do, great, let's do it. I'm on board with whatever it is that helps you function and get through day-to-day activities and even do better than that. Do the things you want to do as well as possible, whatever it takes. Sometimes it's more medicine, sometimes it's less medicine, sometimes it's a combination of medicines. And so I do all of the above, and it's very individualized what we're trying to accomplish and the best way to do it. And so again, this also brings up the idea, don't be afraid to speak up and suggest, hey, what if I try this? Um, Especially if you're my patient, I don't have a problem with that at all. And I recognize you're not necessarily telling me how to do my job. You're trying to help me do my job, which is help me help you feel better. And so all of those are very reasonable strategies, and it's just a matter of trying to pick the right one for the individual person to help them do the best. And so again, I have a general idea of how to start the medicines, how to use the medicines, but you're the ones taking the medicines. You're the ones feeling the symptoms, experiencing the problems. And so your opinion really is important when we're trying to adjust things to achieve whatever goal it is you have in mind. But I am not, and I've said this before, I'm not a very good mind reader. I take it back. I'm a pretty good mind reader, but I'm not a great mind reader. And so at the end of the day, it is much easier if I don't have to try to read your mind and I have an idea of what we're trying to accomplish and what works, what doesn't, what you like and what you don't like. And then I think we can work together to figure out a good game plan. And that should be true for whoever you're seeing, even if it's not me. I know some Parkinson's disease centers have a psychologist on staff to work with movement disorder patients. Is that something that AHN may eventually do? I would love that. Man, I would love to have a psychologist, a psychiatrist on my team, seeing my patients day in and day out. I think that would be a huge help. They're just really hard to find. And plus, there's also cost and working in a team environment. It's always challenging. But the short answer is that would be a great idea. It's on my list of things that I would like to do. It's one of those things that's easier said than done. First of all, psychiatrists and psychologists are incredibly hard to find in an incredible high demand. I don't know if any of you have tried to get in with a psychiatrist or even a therapist or a psychologist lately. They're really hard to find. Um, and then to find somebody who wants to work with my patients and be, part of the team is even harder. And so the short answer is yes, I would love to have that on my team, and it's on my list of things in the back of my mind somewhere back here to work on, but it's also not exactly a easy or feasible thing to do in the near future. Yep. Is it common to feel like you have an internal tremor when your carbidopa levodopa is wearing off? And so, yeah, internal tremors are not uncommon. So most people think of tremors as shaking, visible. But I would say at least half, if not more people also feel, or sometimes it's the only tremor they have, where they just feel like they're shaking. They feel like a limb is shaking, but you look at it and it's not. Or they feel in their chest that they have a vibration or an internal tremor. But you can't see anything visibly. It can be limbs, it can be leg, it can be trunk, it can be neck. Doesn't matter. It can be felt everywhere. But an internal tremor is a very common thing in my world, or at least that I hear about. And it's tough because I can't see it. And so again, unless you verbalize it, unless you describe it, and I try to piece it together, it's very hard to bring out or elicit because it's not something visible that I can see. But I hear about it a lot. It can be, and it's typically a symptom of Parkinson's disease, which is different than, say, like a ventilatory dyskinesia or a dyskinesia type symptom that feeling that you can get, which is usually a side effect of the medicine. And so especially if it's something that you're noticing as your pills wear off, then it's probably an internal tremor or a typical tremor of Parkinson's disease. And maybe more medicine would help with that, or maybe spreading it out or doing some other technique would help with that. But yes, I would say it's pretty common for people to complain about an internal tremor. Donna, I will check out your website and your book. I just opened it. That way I can look at it. All right. Do I have any thoughts on it? I feel like I looked this up the other day when somebody asked me about it, but let me look it up again because I won't even pretend to say it. Um, I'm pretty sure at the end of the day, I won't get it right. All right. The question is, have I any thoughts on this trial and what are my thoughts on GLP-1RA for Parkinson's disease? Thanks. And my short answer is my same answer for just about everything, which is any of these things that are on trial, whether it be for the gut, whether it be for regrowing nerves, whether it be for resetting, the infusions into the brain, whether it be for, any of the number of things that are being researched are, I'll believe it when I see it. Now, I know that sounds pretty skeptical, and I'm fairly a skeptical kind of person, um, but I don't get overly excited for things that are still in trial. I get excited that we are doing trials on these things, and I'm always as hopeful as a relatively pessimistic person can be. But at the end of the day, I don't get overly excited when things are still in trial. I don't get overly excited when things do well in phase 1 or phase 2. Oh, this looks promising. Oh, this is the next big thing in Parkinson's disease. Oh, cure is on the horizon. Um, I don't get too worked up about that. I don't get too excited about it because I can't tell you, and I'm not telling anybody on this call anything they don't already know, which is, man, we've been burned so many times. There's been so many times where something has been the next big thing, or this looks promising, or this is really going to be a major breakthrough, or this is how we get to the cure. And then they try it in humans in phase 3, randomized controlled trials, and it fails. And so my thoughts on all of these trials, including these ones, which I'll look up and make sure I know what exactly you're talking about, is I want to see the data. I want to see that it works. I want to see it tried in humans, because I can't tell you how many things have been looked at in mouse models, worm models, rat models, monkey models, you name it models, and it works great. And then it gets to human models and it doesn't. And I can't tell you how many things that have good safety profiles and the blood work looks great and the measurements look great, that they get to human trials and they don't work. And so anything that comes in a trial form, I'll look at it and I will weigh in on what I think about it. But at the end of the day, I really don't get overly excited about trials or things that look promising until I get it in my hands. I have data to suggest it works and I try it and we see what happens. And so those are kind of my thoughts in general on anything that you send me as a trial. Again, I'll look it up and make sure that I know exactly what they're trialing. And actually, our movement disorder conference is coming up at the end of this month. And so that'll also be where I hear about things in trial and things being looked at. But at the end of the day, again, I reserve kind of excitement or kind of anything outside of just wonder until I see better data. How soon after DBS can I expect to see an effect or an improvement with symptoms? Well, that's a tough question, because DBS is tough. There is some programming and some work that goes into it. And so usually we implant the deep brain stimulator. A couple of weeks later, you come in and get your staples removed, and that's when they turn it on. So that's when they go through the different trials of the different settings and the different um, electrodes on each lead to figure out which one works the best, which contact works the best, which settings work the best, and that's when they start initial programming. But I usually tell my patients heading into deep brain stimulator surgery that this is not a quick fix. This usually takes us a good 6 months of programming, and not just adjusting stimulation, but also adjusting medications before we're kind of happy or heading in the right direction. And so some people get benefit right away. Some people, it does take us a while before we start hitting the nail on the head or getting the settings correct as we want. And so again, that's a little bit variable depending on how it goes, depending on how accurate we are with the targeting, depending on a whole lot of things. And so at the end of the day, don't be frustrated. Don't be frustrated if you're not noticing benefits right away. It can take some time for us to get it right. Sorry, I was opening the next YouTube video, Donna, that I will also watch. Sounds a lot like what I'm talking about, but yes. Are there time-release carbidopa, levodopa medications that could be beneficial? Yes. So carbidopa, levodopa comes in a bunch of different varieties. So generally, the immediate release pill I find to be the best pill. This is the one that's been around forever. This is the yellow pill that everybody takes. It's the one that I work the most with. It's the 25-100 dose. There's a couple of other dosages of the immediate release version, but I find the regular Cinemet 25-100 to be the best pill and the one the easiest to work with. But it's not the only version. There used to be an oral dissolving pill called Parcopa, but nobody makes it anymore, which is really frustrating because a lot of people really liked it. But at least as far as my knowledge to date, that is not available. There is a Cinemet CR, which the CR stands for controlled release. And so that's been around for a long time too. My experience, and these are all my opinions, is the CR doesn't work as well as the immediate release does. It doesn't kick in. People don't feel it work as well. Maybe it lasts a little bit longer, although marginally at best, but it doesn't work as well. And so in my clinic, I tend to not use that during the day, but nighttime would be a time I would use that when you're sleeping, when you don't need to feel it work, but you need it to last a little bit longer. That's when I usually use the controlled release version of Cinemet. Ritari is immediate release and controlled release carbidopa levodopa in one capsule. So it was brought upon by the idea that, this constant up and down isn't good for people. If we have some immediate release, then maybe it'll kick in. And if we have some controlled release, maybe it'll last longer and maybe we'll be able to smooth out the ups and downs. And some people find it works great. And some people, I switch to it, they don't like it, and we switch right back. It's a lot of trial and error. Crexont is the newest kind of longer lasting version of carbidopa levodopa, which again, I have not been able to get yet. It was FDA approved, but not available, at least not to me yet. More to come on that. Levodopa also comes in an inhaler called Ambrosia, which is more of a rescue medicine. So for people who wear off unpredictably, we have an inhaler that kicks in quicker than the pills do. Now, it's not as potent as the pills, and so it doesn't work as well, but to get you kicked back on, sometimes that's beneficial. There's also an intestinal infusion of levodopa called Duopa, which again I've used a handful of times. And so it directly pumps levodopa into your small intestines for 16 hours during the day to try to avoid these ups and downs. Again, it's great in theory in that it corrects a lot of the problems or side effects of levodopa that come with taking it pills and having this burst and then wearing off. But it also comes with a tube and a pump. And so there's a lot of different versions of carbidopa, levodopa, and each of them has a specific role or a specific use, but it really is individualized how we pick which one and what the best choice is. How does rasagiline work? Is there a better medicine that does the same thing? Better is questionable. Better is always questionable. So rasagiline is Azilect. Rasagiline is a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. And the long story short is I used to have this drawn on my whiteboard in my old office, but now I'm in a new office and I don't have that. So I can't even show you if I wanted to. But you just have to take my word for it that there's two enzymes that break down dopamine. One is catecholomethyltransferase, so this is COMT, which is a different class of medications, and another is monoamine oxidase. So monoamine oxidase breaks down dopamine. So if you block monoamine oxidase, hence the monoamine oxidase inhibitors, the MAOIs, you can prevent the breakdown of dopamine, keeping dopamine around longer. Rasagiline is one of those medicines. Selegiline is another one of those medicines. Safinamide or Xadago is the other medicine in that category. That's how it works. So it prevents the breakdown or slows down the breakdown of dopamine, keeping dopamine around longer, which then allows it to work better. Is there a better medicine? The better is subjective. So I use all of those medicines in different people for different things. I don't know that one is better than another. I have some people that really like Azilect. I have some people that really like Selegiline. I don't have as many people on safinamide, but I have some people that take that and like that one too. And so it really comes down to more individualized, subjective, hey, is this working? Or side effects? Should we switch it to a different one? Can we get better results? Again, I don't think one is necessarily quote unquote better, or they've never been compared head to head. And so I don't think one is necessarily statistically better than another. They just have individualized usages, and that's kind of the spiel on the MAO inhibitors. If a patient might have PSP, which is progressive supranuclear palsy, which is one of the Parkinson's plus conditions, and is increasingly closing their eyes, i.e. when shaving, is there an eye specialist they can see? And I can even extrapolate this to people with Parkinson's disease. It's not just PSP patients who sit with their eyes closed or have vision problems. And there's not a good answer to that question. The short answer is yes, you should have an ophthalmologist. I highly recommend ophthalmologists, even more than optometrists. So in my short answer here, there's optometrists, there's ophthalmologists, and there's neuro-ophthalmologists. Optometrists, and again, I'm not any of these, nor am I the expert on the distinguishing features of these, so don't hold me to this, but optometrists are the people who give you glasses. They can check your vision, they can check your eyesight, they can fix you with contacts or glasses and send you on your way. An ophthalmologist is an MD who can look at the back of your eyes, use their imaging equipment to make sure your optic nerve, your retina, the inner parts of your eye look okay. And then a neuro-ophthalmologist is an ophthalmologist or a neurologist who has special training in either ophthalmology or neuro-ophthalmology. They're much harder to find. I think you need at least an ophthalmologist. You need a doctor who can look at your eyes structurally, functionally, and see how they're working. I can't say that I've had a tremendous benefit by sending my patients specifically to a neuro-ophthalmologist. We used to have a specific neuro-ophthalmologist here at Allegheny Health Network, and we have another ophthalmologist who basically is a neuro-ophthalmologist because he's been doing neuro work for a long time. And these were the guys that I've sent a lot of patients to. UPMC also has a neuro-ophthalmologist who I've sent patients to. And I've sent not just Parkinson's patients or PSP patients, but a lot of different patients with neurological problems to these guys. And maybe there's some added insight, but I can't say that I've had a tremendous amount of success getting my patients specifically to a neuro-ophthalmologist out of proportion to what they're getting from their own local ophthalmologist or somebody that's been working with them for a while. And so my usual opinion for PSP, Parkinson's patients, eye closure, eye problems, vision problems, double vision, is if you have a good ophthalmologist, that's probably as good as you're going to get. I have no problems referring you to a neuro-ophthalmologist if we think that it might be more beneficial or they might have some insight that we're not getting through an ophthalmologist, but I've found that it's been marginally beneficial comparatively. I still do it. I get people that ask about it, and sometimes people really do have neurological eye problems that I think a neuro-ophthalmologist would be better at handling or maybe has seen before. But a lot of times your ophthalmologist that you work with, especially if you've had one that you've been seeing for years, who knows you fairly well, does a pretty good job of trying to help manage these and figure out what to do. So that's kind of my ideas on the eye guys. Does the neurosurgeon or movement disorder specialist physician adjust medications when programming the DBS? A little bit of both. So it depends on who you're going to. It depends on where you're going. Depends on who's doing your adjustments, so on and so forth. So here we have neurosurgery has a nurse and a nurse practitioner or PA, can't remember, who does their adjustments. And so if the nurse is doing their adjustments, she cannot change medicines. And even the APPs usually call me, and they say, "Hey, we've adjusted his stimulator and he's floridly dyskinetic. I think we need to cut back medicines." And I say, "Okay, cut back this or this." And so a lot of times for my patients, they usually run the medication adjustments through me. Now, if it's my nurse practitioner who's doing the adjustments, I've trained her how to do medicines too, so she's pretty good at it. And so she doesn't have to come to me, but it's still the movement disorder team who's doing it. We actually just hired a new movement disorder specialist who also has training in doing his own DBS adjustments. So if somebody like that is adjusting you, and actually Dr. Narkopoulos up in Erie does his own DBS adjustments and does them very well. I'm not sure exactly how Dr. Homayan or the UPMC guys do it. I think he can do some of his own adjustments, but they also have an APP who does it. Again, so any of those people can also adjust your medicines. I don't know if a surgeon themselves is doing your adjustment that they're going to feel as confident adjusting your medications. And so that probably should be run through your neurologist or your movement disorder specialist. But again, it also depends on how comfortable they are with the medicines and adjusting things. And so it really is an individualized thing. It depends on who's doing your adjustments and who's actually the one doing the programming. All right, one more. Oh no, this is just a FYI. Bought some inserts at Good Feet store due to the amount of walking and exercise. Great job. I love exercise that I do daily, which cause foot tenderness at times. The inserts are expensive. And I don't see how expensive. I'll leave that up to you guys. But after 2 weeks, soreness is vastly improved, along with hip and back tightness significantly improved. And so, again, good footwear, good shoes, which sometimes do get costly, good inserts, which again can get costly, can be beneficial. And again, exercise is my favorite topic, as you all know. So anything that helps keep you guys up, active, moving, I'm all for. And with that, Casey, I actually ended pretty much on time for a change. And so I'll pass it back to you to give any updates you got.
Thank you, Dr. Leichliter. Thanks everyone for your thoughtful questions. We hope to see you on September 28th at our Step Forward event. Please come sign up. I just put the link in the chat. You can go to our website as well. And we'll be back on October 3rd. Email questions to me ahead of time, or you can ask them during the session. Oh, Donna. Go ahead, Donna.
Yeah, I put this in the chat.
I see that.
Okay.
But I wish that, I'm echoing because I'm on two computers, but I just want to see if you can get to the true answer. That the new medicine from Neil is no better than.
So again, statistically, study-wise, it's supposed to be needed less frequent. But again, I have not been able to get it yet. Amneal is the maker of Ritari. I believe they're also the maker of Crexont, which is the newest version. And you're right, Ritari is going generic, or they're not going to have the patent on it. So this is why they came out with a new medicine, right? Again, whether we like to admit it or not, this is still a business. a big business at that. And so is it better than Ritari, or is it just another way for them to have a bigger market share and make more money? Too soon to tell. So believe me, once I can get it, once I can try it in the correct patient or with a specific purpose, I'll let you know. Believe me, I have no problems letting anybody know what my opinion is of something. If I think something is good, if I don't think something is good, I'll let you know. And so let me play with it. Let me get it. Let me try it. Let's experiment with it a little bit. And we'll see what happens.
But I don't know why that's going on, but is the research really show that the medicine improves?
Well, and again, I'm taking this from the drug rep's mouth. So if you believe the company that is making and selling the drug to you, yes. That's all I got. That's all the information I have, is that statistically, according to studies and according to the drug company, it is indeed improved compared to Ritari. But again, Ritari was supposed to be improved compared to Sinemet and controlled release, and I had plenty of patients who didn't think so. I had plenty of patients that did think so. And so at the end of the day, it's going to be one of those things that we're just going to have to try and see what happens.
Thank you. All right, we'll see you next time.
Have
Bye,
a good one,
everyone.
guys. Thanks.
See you at Step Forward. Bye.